I always felt that cinema was a great place to talk about loneliness somehow, and I was interested in this kind of character who is kind of handsome, smart, has a lot of choices, but somehow doesn't know how to move forward in life. And when I saw the Louis Malle film from 1963, Follet, I was very struck by the authenticity of the main character. So I went back and read the book, and I actually felt that there was a timelessness about this story that you could put in any place, in any time, and it would still kind of make sense as a very basic, identifiable, existential tale, you know. So the paradox is to actually adapt this made it possible for me to really describe many characters in a milieu in Oslo, a kind of environment and milieu that I myself know or come from in a strange way, you know, with people that have choices, some are creative, some people are starting to create families, and I was interested to talk about how vulnerable you are when you're not, if you don't have a family, if you don't have a great career, and you've lived on this kind of dream for a long time and you're reaching your 30s, it's very easy to lose your way and feel that you fall on the outside. So I think that the book by Drieu La Rochelle, the character there really fascinated me. There's a kind of an integrity to this character, which I would call a self-destructive integrity. Someone who reaches for high ideals, but is unable to live up to them. And I think that's somehow tragic and touching. There's something about people reaching their 30s, and you start realizing that, you know, you will forget things. You won't remember everything. You spend your 20s building up this idea that all the books you read, all the relationships you have, create some sort of identity. Where the fact is actually you understand also you forget things. What was that friend I had? I haven't seen him for a long time. What was that book I read, you know? Some people see this as a liberation. Other people get very depressed. So I think it's about a stage in life, but it's also a human thing. It's nothing that just happens to people in their 30s, you know, this feeling of disconnectedness and feeling that maybe a lot of interesting things are going on around you that you're not able to really be a part of. I'm interested in films is to create emotions, you know, and to get people involved in characters. There is a story in this film, of course. It happens in 24 hours in a day, and there's a lot of things going on. But I think, to me, what's most important is to create an emotion of late summer and the melancholy, almost like music, you know, of people, you're going to a party and not feeling that you belong there, talking to a good friend and not knowing what to say. I mean, these human moments with characters is what I'm really most interested in. It was also about a city, Oslo, and I wanted there to be the theme of, how should I say, memory and identity in a city, how we remember a city differently, how we share the same spaces, but we don't see the spaces in the same way. The same moments are very subjective, and there's a kind of a sadness to that. So I start the film with a big homage to different kinds of films. And what I did was I found moments from Norwegian film history portraying Oslo, and I cut it together. So you have, but a lot of the interesting footage I found was from government film, like state films about like the buses. There's a documentary on the buses of Oslo, or the ambulances, or the kindergarten in the 80s, you know, and personal films that I borrowed from people I know, archive footage. So I was trying to create like a sense of a collage of memories from the city, and I took documentary interviews I did with people, the sound. And I asked them, a little bit inspired by Georges Perec, you know, he made a whole book of I Remember. And I asked people, I interviewed them, like, just say I remember and start talking about Oslo. And then I had very strange experiences. Some people started crying. Some people told us funny story. I mean, very varied. And I cut this together, and I tried to create like 3 minutes of a memory of a city seen as a fragmentation, you know, just to start the film out like a prologue. There's something nice, you know, about being able to show something specific, like almost like my own memory. Like creating, for example, in the film there's a scene when they're bicycling home from a party, and some guy's drunk and he's got a fire extinguisher and he lets out smoke in the street, and the sun is just about to come up, so the sky is beginning to be light. And to stand, you know, it's the dream of the director. It's the child in me. I stand one early morning with 50 people in the street corner. The police has, you know, shielded off all the traffic, and I can just say action, and this moment just happens. And it happens just when the light is coming up. Stuff like that is great about filmmaking. And hopefully, you know, I sample that moment and I can show it to someone else. On a very basic level, I've been video filming and filming on Super 8 since I was a child. And this idea of documentation of moments is still a part of me, even though I make fiction films and feature films. I think this sense of documentation is something that people will hopefully respond to when they see the film as well.
Ekkopunktet?
Yes. Det klassisk Oslo-spot, da. Ja, vi må dele med innflytterne. Bare stå sånn. Og så trampe hardt. Ja.
I shoot on 35. I like the beauty of images. I like spatial treatments. I like light. I like to choose interesting locations. But that must not be in opposition to character study and keeping the mise en scène close to the skin, you know, making something sensitive is what I'm interested in. Something sensuous and sensing the world and the surroundings somehow. And also creating characters that have a psychological depth. After the dogma movement in Scandinavia, a lot of directors seems to kind of do a lot of films with handheld video cameras and close-ups, melodrama, with no space and beauty. It's just about character and acting. I think both of those things should come together ideally. I think that's my ideal as a filmmaker, you know, to make a real movie. You need to care about it all, you know. In cinema, I'm always fascinated by the fascination of high and low culture meeting. I'm very interested in the fact that you can have something which is structurally and philosophically quite sophisticated, but it can also be really beautiful to look at. I think in Western culture and in the culture I come from, the idea of exploring the authenticity of surface, you know, of a culture which, how you present yourself, how things look, really matter, but behind that there's an infinite complex structure of social codes, economy, psychology. And cinema is the greatest art form to talk about this kind of representation. When I say this, it sounds very academic, but I think we can all recognize how beautiful it is to see a film that has a good thought and a beautiful image that can come together. I think that's just basically, that fascinates me with filmmaking, you know. I'm experimenting, you know. When I make a film, I don't think I have a clear idea about everything. To make a movie takes years sometimes, and you know, it takes a lot of energy, and a lot of people have to stay out late and can't be with their family, you know. So you need to make sure you make a film about something you really care for. So I'm experimenting, you know, I'm trying something. It's a bit of a stunt. When I was younger, we were making skateboard movies, and we would go out and skate, find a big staircase or something, you know, and someone would jump and someone would film, and sometimes we would fall and sometimes we would make it. And that kind of stunt, it still feels like that when I do movies. You'd never really know how the hell it's gonna turn out, you know. It's fingers crossed and you do your best. I think the way forward must be that we don't get stuck in nostalgia, you know. So I'm interested in writing and authors, and I'm interested in the history of cinema, but I think the important thing is to try to create a contemporary expression that relays the level of sophistication that we admire in the old, and try somehow to bring that forward into a new language. And I think in literature, since you're asking me about books, I think there's something interesting to see how vast the landscape has been explored by literature in the last 100, 150 years. And in cinema, maybe not to such degree. It has, we have examples in, you know, here and there, scattered. But I think a lot of the general storytelling cinema has a tendency to be more homogenized in the way that we choose to structure stories. So I just think it's important to remember and be inspired by other art forms, music, literature, you know. I experienced in Norway, sometimes when I talk about wanting to try a new way of telling a story, for example, or trying a new concept for a scene, that people think that it will be very intellectual or very cold. To me, this is the opposite of how I feel. You know, something experimental can be quite fun and interesting, you know. Look at Woody Allen. He's very smart and he's very funny. I mean, it's possible.